Overwatch 2 recently came out, and today I'm going to be testing a AMD Phenom II X6 1035T in it on the low settings and epic settings. We're going to be pairing it with an RTX 3060 that is overclocked slightly, and also 8GB of DDR2 800MHz RAM, as well as you can see everything in CPU-Z and GPU-Z and hardware monitor and task manager. I should also mention the CPU is overclocked from 2.6 GHz to 3.1, which is not really a big overclock at all for this CPU, which is also making Windows read the memory speed at 667 MHz, even though it's actually 800. On the low preset, without AMD FSR, the game was running actually quite nice, so it was getting around 100-ish FPS on average. It would drop into the 70s and 60s at times, especially when you die you'd get a stutter, but to be fair, when you're playing the game, you aren't getting stutters. Only when you die you stutter. And I'd say that's perfectly acceptable. And it ran, well, I don't have anything to complain about, it ran pretty good. Quite noisy, but that's not because of the CPU, that's just because the cooler on here is not really that good at being quiet. That's fine. But yeah, besides that though, when it plays this game, it runs pretty good. And on the epic settings, which is the highest possible preset in the game, with AMD FSR turned off and all the dynamic resolution scales and all that stuff turned off, the game was still running quite well, though I did notice quite a bit more stutter with the epic settings than on the low settings, and I don't really notice that much visual difference between the low and the high settings, or epic settings I guess it would be considered. So I guess on this game I would recommend the low settings, because something making is, what did I just say? Because something's making it more CPU intensive on the epic settings. I'm sure you can go through and turn on each individual setting to figure out what's the most CPU intensive. That's what I would normally do, but in this case, I don't notice a difference anyway between epic and low, so probably low would be the absolute best option here. Now, I did have a lot more benchmarks. I did test the medium settings and high settings, but due to the humongous queue, I don't want to go over and redo the benchmarks because I did them wrong. So apparently when you open up the game, you have to actually let it sit on the main menu for about 4 minutes, so then it loads everything in. Otherwise the CPU usage is going to be 100% maxed out all the time, and then it will run significantly worse. I couldn't work out why it was running so bad earlier, not earlier today, but yesterday when I did the benchmarks, and that's the reason why. So yeah, when you change the settings, if the CPU is at 100%, let it sit, let it load. Once it loads, it should run significantly better, and you have to do that every single time you open the game, which is a little bit annoying. There's also something else I found annoying about the game. So the only way you can change the settings is by opening up the game. And to open up the game, you have to wait through that queue. The queue could be between nothing and, let's say, 20,000. I've had a queue of 20,000. Well, that right there is not ideal. You should be able to actually change the game settings before you actually get into the queue, because once you change the setting, you have to restart the game, which restarting the game makes you have to sit through that queue once again. I don't know, just a thought. But I'm pretty impressed in this AMD Phenom. It can play the game perfectly fine on the low settings. I've played it for about an hour on the low settings and didn't find anything significantly bad about it. Yeah, it would stutter occasionally, but not anything major. And on the epic settings, it stutters significantly more. It does drop into the 50s and 40s at times, especially in the more intensive areas on some maps, but it is still playable, but yeah, definitely not ideal.